Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks for coming tonight. And also thank you TEDxSquamish women for inviting me here today. So it's true, I am an architect and I practice locally here in Squamish, and it has been amazing. The process of becoming an architect is a long and hard one. And for me, it took a really long time because I was never quite sure why I was doing it. My friend Amy was struggling with the same set of questions, and she was constantly challenging me to convince her to complete the process, to become an architect, and to convince her that it would be worth it. So this is a story about making architecture and making spaces, and why I truly believe it matters. Here in beautiful, beautiful Squamish, I think we're all very lucky to wake up in the morning to these beautiful mountain views. We are lucky to live in a community that shares this common value for the outdoors and to feel a sense of connection to each other through our natural environment. But the one thing that we don't talk about quite as often is, what about our built environment? And what is our duty and responsibility to the built environment? And also, what are the possibilities? What we add to the constructed world has a degree of permanence. It's a huge commitment, and for this reason, I think it's an important environmental concern. The sense of responsibility for our built environment is growing, and it's the reason behind the green building movement. There are more and more green materials, energy-efficient systems, and technologies commonly available in our marketplace. So this means we aren't just talking about sustainability anymore, we're doing it. And we're starting to implement these strategies as part of the expected norm. And I think that is awesome and amazing. Yet, as an architect, I still feel like there's something crucial missing from the conversation, and that is, what about the quality of the spaces that we make? How do these materials, technologies, and systems come together to create a space that you will like, that you will still like in 20 years, and that you will still love in 50 years? As an architect, I feel it's my responsibility to make spaces that will continue to have social and cultural vitality, spaces that will be active and engaging over its entire lifetime. So how do we do that? How do we make architecture that will last a lifetime? Well, it always helps to start with a glass of wine. In winemaking, there's an expression called terroir, which is a complete natural environment in which a particular wine is produced, including factors such as soil, topography, and climate, and also the characteristic taste and flavor imparted to a wine by the environment in which it is produced. And I really love this notion because it suggests that the experience of each wine is truly unique and intrinsically connected to where it was made and how it was made. The nuances and subtleties of each experience draw from all the factors that cultivate its growth. In a similar way, we try to grow and cultivate architecture. We draw from a number of factors, such as the stunning views, the topography of the land, its geology, the functional needs, the people who will be using it, the climate, microclimate, local building technologies, and culture. If we can create a space that integrates and responds to all this criteria, maybe we can invent a place that has its own essence or spirit. A space that offers its own unique set of experiences and it articulates and expresses a unique identity. As in terroir, the architecture will have a characteristic taste and flavor imparted to it by its environment. So in architecture, we call this genius loci. which is a prevailing character or atmosphere of a place, or the original Latin definition, which is literally spirit of place. This sounds like an academic and intellectual term, but in practice, the process is very intuitive. So once we've gathered enough information to start the design, we begin, and sometimes it starts, it feels like you're just piecing together parts of a puzzle. But there comes a point when I can start imagining what the spaces will feel like. I begin imagining experiences, and this opens the design to more and more possibilities. I can feel it in my gut when we're on the right track, and I can also sense when it's not quite coming together. And sometimes the buildings design themselves. As an architect, I believe that with every project, I have both an opportunity and an obligation to make a lasting and positive improvement to our environment. And this was especially true for these clients, the Sisters of the Queen of Peace Monastery. You may have seen a few around town. So after an extensive and exhaustive search for land, the sisters decided to resettle here in the Squamish Valley to build their new home. And for them, a new home is a monastery, which is definitely not your typical home. So we started by studying spaces like this one. This is a refectory or dining room of an old monastery in France where one of the sisters used to live. There is so much richness and history to these spaces. And what's really interesting is that they're not at all outdated. They continue to support and enrich the monastic lives within. So we realized that we needed to create spaces like this one and this one. Spaces that are deeply ingrained with monastic tradition. This is a cloister walk, and it is integral to the lives of contemplative nuns. They will spend a part of every day taking contemplative walks, and the widths of these corridors allow them to pass each other without disturbing their thoughts. And they are just really beautiful and inspiring places. The sisters chose this particular place in the Squamish Valley because it is remote yet still accessible to visitors. They wanted a home in the mountains, but also near water, with enough land to cultivate into gardens. So this piece of land responded to all of those parameters. But more than that list of ingredients, this image captures a deep and profound sense of connection to the landscape and to these stunning views. To me, this image articulates the true spirit of the place we needed to create, which is no pressure. So here's the space that the new home we made for them. This view gives you an overall sense of the size and complexity of the monastery, and also how it sits in the landscape with the mountains beyond. From the other side, you actually look up into the monastery. This is our cloister walk. We've taken this very traditional monastic space, reinterpreted it, and adapted it to our local, more contemporary culture and ways of building, which is the same concept we used here in the refectory where they gather to dine as a community. This is one of the sisters ringing the bell to call the rest of the sisters to worship in the chapel. Even though it is located deep within the interior of the building, we still wanted to create a connection to the outside world. There's a large window in the bell tower above that pulls sunlight down into this bell-ringing alcove. So we explored different ways of connecting to the natural rather than just visually through large windows. And speaking of large windows, this is definitely a space that we wanted to get right. It's their chapel. We created an expressive and uplifting sense of connection and openness to the outdoors. while the interior of the chapel itself has a warmth and character that invites people in to gather and to worship. This is a chapel as it sits in the winter landscape. It just projects warmth. And this image really speaks to me, not because it describes the space, but because it captures this one particular moment. This is Sister Jean Marie, and she's entered the chapel before the other sisters. And as she waits for them to arrive and for the service to begin, she has her eyes closed and the sun is shining on her face. I like to imagine the tranquility of that moment and to imagine what it would feel like. I like to imagine that even with her eyes closed, she has a sense of the space and she's connecting with something beyond herself and also within herself. And if so, then to me, that moment of connection captures the very essence of genius loci, or the genuine spirit of place. So my question was, how do we create architecture that lasts a lifetime? If we make spaces that connect with our culture or help us connect with each other or with ourselves, I believe we can create a lasting and meaningful, positive improvement to our environment. And these will be the spaces that we'll be able to pass on to future generations. Would this have been enough to convince my friend Amy to finally become an architect? I don't know. I really don't know. Amy passed away in a tragic accident early this year, and we shared a love for architecture and the value of sharing ideas. I think when you lose someone meaningful in your life, it can indelibly change your perspective on how you want to live. Losing Amy made me realize that it's important to keep this conversation going. And this inspired me to speak at TEDx today, which I would never normally do. So through this talk, I hope you will also examine and evaluate the built spaces around us, to notice them, to feel them, and to connect with them a little bit differently. Thank you.